Hello and welcome to the PA Path Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Creighton University. Our guest today is Dr. Emily Babcock, Associate Professor and Director of the Creighton University PA Program in Phoenix, Arizona. Dr. Babcock has been a PA since 1997, and throughout her career, she has been involved in training the next generation of PAs at several educational institutions, including her current role as Founding Program Director for the Creighton PA Program in Arizona. Dr. Babcock received her PA degree from Midwestern University in Downers Grove, Illinois, and went on to receive her master's from the University of Nebraska and her Doctor of Health Sciences from Nova Southeastern University. Dr. Babcock brings to her role a broad spectrum of experience, ranging from practice in a variety of medical specialties, clinical research, PA education, and education consulting.
Emily, thanks so much for joining us. We're excited to hear about your developing program, but before we get into that, let's learn about your career, because you've been a PA since 1997, graduated the year behind me, and we both ended up in the same physician group when we first started in internal medicine. And it's just, we were just talking off air about how life is serendipitous and that we continue to circle back with each other over the years. Tell us about your path to becoming a PA. How did you first learn about the profession, and why did you want to go join this thing?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here with you and Stephanie and share this time with you on your podcast. So thank you so much for having me. My story to becoming a PA, a little convoluted, which a lot of us who became PAs in the 94 seem to have some kind of similar stories. But essentially, a little background about it, which will make it make sense, is that I grew up in a really small town in rural Wisconsin. And at the time, the town had about 900 people. And it was one of those towns on a lake that in the summertime had double the populations because people were coming there to vacation and to see family. And then in the wintertime, it went back to 900 people. So I was one of those quote unquote townies who lived there all the time. So I went to a really small high school there. My mom was a nurse, and she has since passed, but my mom was a nurse and my dad was in sales. And our little town had one doctor, and he took care of everybody. And the setting was a place where essentially the nearest place to get an x-ray was at least a 15-minute drive. And the nearest medical center, which was small, it's not a medical center by today's standards, was at least a 30-minute drive. So this was a small place. And my mom was really super clear in her desire for me to become a doctor and not a nurse. And that was the deal. That was the story. And my grandfather, who was my dad's dad, was also pretty sure that would be the perfect career for me as well. In fact, he was somebody, my Grandpa Alan, was somebody who supported my education in all of the ways. He was always such a wonderful educator of me, and he supported my education and was behind everything I did. And with my family pushing me that direction, I always was interested in medicine and all things to do with science and medicine anyways. To me, it seemed like a totally reasonable thing to pursue. And then I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison to get my undergrad degree. And I started in biology, but ended up graduating with a zoology degree because of the college I was situated in didn't have biology, but zoology. So it's an interesting hodgepodge of things to come together in the sciences. But this is where the story starts about PA. I remember looking through the course catalog at Madison. Yes, back in the day where you actually had to get the book and you had to read about the courses. So I remember reading about the courses, and I saw something called physician assistant, and you could get a bachelor's degree in it. And I thought, isn't that a smart thing to do? Why don't I major in that and then become a doctor? I thought that was just the smartest thing I'd ever thought of. And I actually applied to University of Wisconsin's PA program back in the day. And this was probably, this had to be like 1992 or something like that. And they were so nice. They contacted me and said, we don't really think you understand what you're applying for, but let us explain it to you. So even though I hadn't known much of what I was getting into, that experience helped me start to learn about becoming a PA and learn more and talk to more people about it. As I progressed through undergrad, I continued to learn more about it. A few years later, when I received my bachelor's degree from Madison, I decided to apply to PA school. And I credit that experience of kind of falling over my own feet, trying to figure out what PA was. Back in that time, I applied actually on paper. They had paper applications to go to PA school. You guys understand what I'm talking about, I think. And ultimately, I was honored to be given a seat at the Midwestern University PA Program at Downers Grove, Illinois. And that was 95, and I graduated in 97. But a funny thing about that paper application was, at the time, there were 3 check boxes on that application. And one was bachelor's, one was master's, and one was either or. And of course, I knew enough about PA at that time, so I checked either or, knowing that either degree that I got, I could practice as a PA the exact same. So I checked either or. and they put me in the bachelor's track. So I remember calling my family to tell them I was going to become a PA. And when I had the phone call with my grandfather that I had mentioned earlier, I remember he actually said, okay, so you're going back to school to get another bachelor's degree to not become a doctor? And I said, yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So that was the path to me actually entering PA school.
And back then, there were only, like when I graduated in 96, there were only 29,000 certified PAs. I remember, I'm sure you had this experience when you first started practicing at Good Samaritan. Like you had to explain to everybody what a PA was.
Absolutely.
The term physician assistant made everybody think you're a medical assistant. Yeah. So I get that. I can understand that. So you ended up in internal medicine just like I did. What led you to that path?
Actually, I feel like I got lucky again. I was hired by one of my preceptors. And I love that story because we still hear that story today about students getting hired by their preceptors. But it was an internal medicine rotation I had done. And in fact, I liked it so much that I did 2 with that practice and then did another elective in inpatient internal medicine because I was just really drawn to it. I think I've just really loved the puzzle of the whole thing. The artistic blend between caring for patients and being a human caring for humans, and also putting together the puzzle piece of kind of the mystery of what was going on with the patient. So I really like that. So I worked there for about 3 years after graduation, and it was really great. That practice ultimately over those 3 years grew to having 8 physicians and up to 5 PAs. A couple were part-time at the time. And actually, a couple of those PAs I worked with were also graduates of Midwestern, one in my class, and then another gentleman the year after my class. So we all knew each other. It was like a family from the get-go. And then one of my PA teachers from Midwestern also practiced there. So I got to go into practice with colleagues and a teacher of mine. And it was just ideal because the gentleman who hired me, Dr. Saran, was so welcoming and so excited about the PA profession that it was just a fantastic job to have. But then a number of years later, I ended up moving to Walnut Creek, California, and I transitioned into dermatology. And this was a really great experience. A gentleman by the name of Dr. Ed Becker hired me. I even forget how we found each other. I was living in Illinois at the time. He was obviously in California with a solo dermatology practice. He'd never had a PA, but he was intrigued at the concept. And he was a solo practice dermatologist. And in those days, this is around the year 2000 or so, he was exploring the PA concept and that was a time when cosmetic dermatology was starting to become more interesting. And I remember conversations with him when he said, I'm trying to find the blend between medical dermatology and then offering these other services. But he was a medical dermatologist at heart, and he always has been. And I just love that. So he hired me on the phone after an interview. So when I showed up to go work for him, it was the first time we met each other. I remember knocking down his door and said, hello, I'm your new PA. And it was a fantastic relationship. In fact, I've often told other PA students that to me, the most important thing was that relationship between your supervising physician or collaborating physician and yourself. And that relationship is really the foundation for how great the practice can be working together. And that was exactly what that was. I stayed there for a number of years and then through some other kind of family circumstances ended up in Arizona where I am now. And that was almost 20 years ago. And I did practice for another year in Arizona in physical medicine and rehabilitation for about a year. And that's when I made the transition into full-time PA educator status.
So talk to us about that transition. What was it that drew you into the educational realm?
Like I hear a lot of PA teachers say, I always felt this pull towards education and towards teaching, but I had no idea how that would happen or when it would happen because PAs are trained to be clinicians. We're not trained to be educators, and certainly not back then when I was trained. So I looked to those who came before me. I always really connected with my PA professors. And like the person I had mentioned that I ended up working with, her work intrigued me, that she could practice clinically, she could share her knowledge and teach in a PA program. I always thought that was really neat. So I really connected with that. And then actually within about a year or two after graduating from Midwestern, I ended up working at Midwestern as an adjunct faculty and did things like, if I recall right, I might have helped with interviews. I think I ran some small group kind of case studies with students and did a few things like that. And that was within a few years of graduation. And I think from that point I was hooked. I just didn't know what that path was going to look like. And it was a number of years later when, as I mentioned, I moved to Arizona. And this is even more uncanny, is that I had a new baby daughter who was less than a year old, and I had a daughter who was a year and a half. And I wasn't sure how I was going to make this transition. And I was a member of a mom's club here in Arizona. And one of the ladies in the mom's club was a PA. She's a PA here at Mayo Clinic, Arizona. And we got to know each other. And she said, "Oh, you like to teach? I can introduce you to some people that are in the teaching environment." And that began my connection with A.T. Still University in Mesa. And at that time, I started to teach a few things for them. And then I was able to get my very first appointment as a full-time PA educator a couple of years later.
A few years ago, Creighton University decided to set up a independently accredited PA program, separate from its Omaha PA program, because that's where Creighton's main campus is. But they also have a presence with their health sciences campus in Phoenix. And when Creighton decided that they wanted to have a separately accredited program in Phoenix, a program director position came up. So talk to us about your path into Creighton University and how that went.
The path was, I just felt like it was a fortuitous natural path. What I mean by that is I had also been working for a number of years at the NAU PA program in Arizona, Northern Arizona University, with the PA program that was based in, or is still based in, Phoenix. And I was a member of that founding faculty. After being there for a number of years, I made the decision to step out of education. It ended up being about 2 years. And I did some clinical research and explored being a PA in a totally different realm as a sub-I on clinical investigations. But because of our connection stuff and because you knew I was in Arizona, we started communicating and we started talking about the concept that Creighton University was wanting to start a PA program in Arizona. And that was around COVID time, of course. So the plans were starting and stopping and were at the whim of what the environment looked like because of COVID. But eventually the green light went on to start the program. And I thought, I think this is my time to apply. I always wanted to be a program director, but I always said, I only want to do it for the right place at the right time. And there it was. Creighton was coming to Phoenix, or Creighton PA was coming to Phoenix. Creighton had been in Phoenix training medical students for about 10 years, just shy of 10 years when I got here. So the fact that Creighton was going to create a PA program in Phoenix, I already was here. I was very comfortable with the climate of education in PA in the state of Arizona. I had worked for a number of the programs. I knew a lot of people. And I knew about our communities, and I felt like I had a really good holding on what our communities look like and what the needs of our communities were and how much we needed more medical providers in the state of Arizona. So I applied for the job and through the process, got the job.
Let's take a quick break for a word from our episode sponsor, Creighton University. Are you ready for your dreams of becoming a PA to take flight? Housed in a medical school with over 130 years of history, Creighton University's 2 accredited PA programs are ready to help you reach your professional goals. The PA program in Omaha, Nebraska is situated on the university's home campus. It pairs a top-notch PA education with the excitement of an undergraduate campus. The second program, located on Creighton's Phoenix, Arizona Health Sciences campus, is located in a state-of-the-art facility nestled in the heart of downtown Phoenix. Learn more about Creighton's 2 PA programs in Omaha and Phoenix at www.creighton.edu/PA program and find out how to become a Blue Jay PA today.
So while the Creighton University PA program in Omaha had already been established, it was also in the development phase, but was already established and pretty well built. Because the Phoenix program is a separately accredited program, you were given the opportunity with your team to develop something that maybe was rooted and similar in ways to the Omaha program, but definitely has some unique perspectives and some unique aspects to it. So why don't you talk a little bit about what it's like to develop a program from the ground up and having the opportunity to create a program that is really regionally specific in your mission and how you apply Creighton's mission to the program in Phoenix?
Yes, that was one of the things that completely intrigued me about this position, was being a part of Creighton University, which, as a previous person from the Midwest, Creighton University was near and dear to my heart. I have friends and family that have gone to Creighton University. So the concept that I was able to be a part of Creighton University as a whole and then connect the Phoenix communities through PA with Creighton, it was just, like I said, the perfect opportunity. So essentially, what it was like to start a new program was, it was really overwhelming. If I'm very honest with you, it was real overwhelming. And thanks to your leadership and your direction, I was able to follow and learn from the success of the Creighton PA program in Omaha, which had been a number of years older than this program, maybe 3-4 years older than this program when this one started. And what a blessing to have a role model in you, but a role model in the program itself to see what is already working and what is Creighton already doing. So that part was really the beautiful part about it, is the umbrella was already here and the culture was already here. Starting the program here, though, was interesting because, of course, the first thing I did was hire a medical director and hire a team of faculty members who were from here. And so these people were coming with lots of PA education experience, which was also a wonderful thing to have. So creating it together, it really ended up being a tapestry of best practices and best experiences between a team of people that had brought their experience from other places. So it was really neat to sit down and say, what worked well in that program for you and what didn't work well and what do we want to bring together? So it became this culture of experience to bring together what we wanted to do with Creighton University. So it was really quite the group effort. And essentially the program is set up is that it is 12 months of didactic education followed by 16 months of clinical rotation experience.
So that sounds like that's one of the things that stands out about your program that might be different than many others, that extended period of clinical practice time. What are some of the other things that you like to point out to applicants that help you stand out? Particularly, Phoenix is a market with several other programs. So how do you like to advise your applicants about the uniqueness of your program?
Essentially, I always tell people who inquire that we're really lucky to be in a state that has a number of very strong PA programs, and we're in a state that needs providers. We're all in a wonderful position to be able to address the workforce shortage and to educate PAs to go into our environment. A few things that are different about Creighton University Phoenix is it's new and innovative, of course, because it's a new program, but it's really founded on the spirit of serving others. And I always tell applicants that the spirit of serving others and working as a PA, they're one and the same. So for me, the spirit of Creighton University really is completely in line with the desire for people to become PAs and serve others. Our program is guided by Jesuit principles, and one that comes to mind is cura personalis, which means care for the whole person. And I find that applicants who are service-minded really identify with that, and they really feel drawn to Creighton because of that. And the other one I like to highlight is men and women with and for others. And it really highlights the collaboration as a student, when you're a student in the program, and the attitude and the culture that you take out with you to serving others in the community. So those two principles are really important. And hopefully what we'll create here after we have a couple years of graduates is a growing family, a Creighton growing family in Arizona, and who knows where else, that will produce graduates that will continue that spirit of service to others in all ways that are possible, and then possibly giving back to Creighton and helping us develop a whole network of preceptors and people who want to serve others in that way too, and give back and continue to train other students in the future.
So when you think about applicants to the Creighton PA program Phoenix, knowing that there are other fantastic programs in the Phoenix and in the Arizona area, what do you tell prospective applicants to your program about how to best set themselves apart for your specific program? How can they better prepare to be a competitive applicant for the Creighton PA program in the Phoenix area?
Yeah, one of the things that we suggest to them goes right back to actually what I was saying about the spirit of service. We look for students who are service-minded, and that students who can demonstrate that in their application in service to others. And that may look like community service to their religious organization. That might look like service to the homeless. That might look like service to a family that needed their help. We really look for service in all of its forms. And whether it's paid employment service or whether it's volunteer service, we look at all of that as a really key part of this. And we find that, or I have found just with my first class, that looking for that kind of spirit of service really is obvious in the class that we have right now, because they came in with that spirit, and I'm seeing them develop that spirit and hopefully seeing them carry that out onto rotations when they start in a little while with that spirit of service. We also tell applicants, and this may sound silly, but we tell applicants to make sure that their written word and their essays are really unique and thoughtful, so it really represents them. And of course, that they're well written. We want candidates who can come in and have good written language. And as time has gone on, I think that sometimes expressing ourselves through written language isn't as common today as it was maybe when we wrote our essays with pens many years ago. So we look for that as well. And then we also look for students to have healthcare experience with patients so that primarily when they come in to the Creighton PA program, they have already identified with what it feels like to care for somebody else. And they've really connected with that. And they know then that is something that they want to do. Because the worst thing is to have somebody get accepted into a PA program who's very intelligent, has great grades, but then gets into the quite difficult work of treating patients sometimes and finds that they don't really like it or they don't connect with it. So I think that clinical practice experience or the hands-on patient care experience really is an important key. And we've added things to our acceptable list, such as working on a crisis line. You might not be seeing a patient in person, but you certainly are there for somebody and reaching out to help them.
So, Emily, when we used to take the stagecoach to Midwestern, you're talking about how different it is, and you're right. It was, right? The internet was barely alive, and we had to wait for the packet to arrive from the program by mail.
Right.
So it is a totally different world. You said something early on that I don't want to gloss over it because I think there are, I don't know what the actual statistics are, but I would gather it's less than 5% of PAs get involved in clinical research as a sub-I or a principal investigator, unless you're an educator doing a research, always as part of that. But to actually do clinical research, I wonder if we could just talk a little bit about that and describe the role you had and how is that different from your other practice experiences?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had two roles in the clinical research realm. And, much like your question is, I find that some clinical research companies aren't necessarily sure what skills a PA has to leverage. What skills do you use? Do you use the skills that are clinician and ability to do a proper physical exam and glean information from that? Or, for instance, when I first started, I served as a research specialist looking at patient records or talking to patients and matching them with clinical trials that might benefit them. So having that medical knowledge to be able to match a patient to a trial that could be beneficial for that patient. And a lot of the trials really are, for some patients, are a means to healthcare. They may not be able to have adequate healthcare. And sometimes, in clinical trials, there's fantastic healthcare that comes through these trials that can be available to patients in that realm. So I did a lot of that, kind of working with patients and matching to trials that they might be interested in or that they could benefit from. But on the other hand, I also was a sub-investigator for a few trials. For instance, one of them was a knee surgical trial. And my job was to independently evaluate and do a physical exam on the patient before surgery, and then to do a number of monthly follow-ups with this patient upwards out of a year and do that same clinical exam specifically over a course of time so that I could document my findings that were separate from the surgeon who actually performed the surgery and was doing his or her physical exam.
Really interesting and just a very unique way for PAs to practice. We always do to highlight different sort of niche places where PAs find themselves working and bringing value to, whether that's clinical realm or the research realm. Emily, it's been really interesting to hear about your journey and to hear about the Creighton PA Phoenix program. Before we wrap up, we always like to give our guests an opportunity to leave us with some parting thoughts, whether that is addressing something that you didn't feel like you had an opportunity to say, or advice for pre-PA students or current PA students, whatever you'd like to leave us with parting thoughts. We are anxious to hear it.
I think I'll leave you with something that I think about a lot, which is as a program director and as a PA educator, of course, I'm given the opportunity to interview candidates for people who want to become a PA educator. And as we all know, there's a lot of PAs practicing clinically that are interested in becoming a PA educator, but much like I was back in the 90s, they don't know how to do that. How do you step in and how do you know if you're a good teacher? And people would say to me, don't you feel like you miss clinical practice as a full-time PA educator? And what I tell people, whether it's that question or whether it's people coming from clinical practice saying, gosh, I'm really concerned that if I don't practice full-time, that I'm turning away from my clinical profession. And what I found for myself, and that I often wonder if other people feel this way too, is that unquantifiable thing that is so wonderful in caring for patients, the connection with patients, the humanism, and truly being there for somebody, I've realized is exactly what I feel like I get when I'm working with my students. It's almost the exact same feeling and that same sense inside, that place in your soul that feels like you truly are giving back to people in a special way. And I really feel like it's really the same. So being an educator for so many years, I don't think I've lost that. I feel like I carry that still with me, whether it's treating a patient or whether it's working with a student or a group of students. So I encourage PAs who think about education and wanting to get involved to not be worried that they will lose that special connection.
That's really well said, Emily. I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us about your program and your journey. And we wish you the very best of luck as your program continues in its path.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We want to thank Dr. Babcock for her time and insights into the Creighton University Phoenix PA program. Tune in next time as we speak with leaders of the profession, both nationally and internationally.